Merchants are the unsung heroes of RPGs. They provide everything you need to start your adventure. They even have a network to offer better gear the further along you are. They even show up in dungeons to offer you their goods. Even if you have never heard of Recettear before, you have more than likely seen one of the many memes that has spawned. Capitalism ho! Reset's father left on his adventure 3 months ago. Reset does her best to take care of the house and herself while he is away. One evening, Reset answers a knock at the front door to find a fairy named Tyr who has come to collect on her father's debts. The two come to an agreement to turn the house into an item shop to pay back the debt, instead of Tyr seizing the house and kicking Reset to the curb. Tyr tries her best to teach Reset how to manage her shop and keep proper record of her finances. The debt owed is so large that Tyr won't tell Reset the exact amount that is owed. Instead of asking for a lump sum, Tyr asks for weekly payments in an ever-increasing amount. If Reset misses any of these payments, she'll be out on the streets. Each day is broken into 4 time periods. Different activities are available during different times of the day, and certain activities will cause time to pass. Reset can visit locations around town, hire adventurers to find loot, and open the shop to sell their items. The main gameplay loop is selling the items you have acquired to your customers. You can buy items in bulk from the guild hall and the market, or pay an adventurer to collect the items for you in a dungeon. Customers will want to haggle for a certain price for each item. In order to beat the game, you will need to earn enough money to pay all the weekly payments on time, up to the final payment on the 5th week. With the final payment, the lone shark fairy will leave, and maybe someday your slacker dad will come home. Digital game distribution began to really hit its stride in the early 2010s. There was the success of Xbox Live Arcade with Braid, Super Meat Boy, and Fez. Steam started to have millions of active users. It began to be much easier for smaller game developers to get their games to more people. There was such a surge in successful indie games that someone made Indie Game the Movie. Smaller devs aren't under the same constraints that AAA developers are, which allows more daring game ideas. Save the princess, kill the evil vampire lord, discover the city's dark secrets, stop an alien invasion, and stop the rise of a tyrannical king are all common goals you might have as a hero in a video game. Most games let you fulfill your fantasy of being a hero, be it in a large scale or just leading your sports team to a win. But there are those rare games that are now becoming more common that instead of saving the world, you just live a normal life. In these games, you take over a farm, start your own business, or work a minimum wage job. Most of these games revolve around earning money to buy upgrades so you can make money faster. If there is an ending, usually you can continue on playing in a free play mode. Unlike in RPGs where you can just make the final boss wait while you do all the side quests despite everyone saying you must hurry or the world might be destroyed, if a lone shark fairy tells you have 1 week to pay up, you better pay up. Even if you do game over, the knowledge of the mechanics you learned can make it quite easy to beat the game on your next attempt. Like if your customer thinks your roller coaster costs too much because it's so old, you can just delete it and build the same one again and they'll ride it. The concept behind Recettear intrigued me. I've been the one buying items in the RPGs, but what if I became the shopkeeper and sold the items to the heroes instead? This year led me through all the tutorials. I started to make money. I was introduced to Louis the Adventurer and helped guide him through the Hall of Trials. Going through the dungeon was fun, so I came back later to go into the new dungeon that had opened up. I got to the crown slime and Louis dealt basically no damage to it. The slime crushed him and I could only take home one of the items. Later got a new sword and equipped Louis with it and tried again. The results were the same, except now I lost money on the sword as well. As time passed, I couldn't make the first week's payment because I spent all my time in the dungeon using all of my items. With that, I game overed. I didn't want to have to start over, so quit the game and didn't return to it later. When I first saw Potionomics, I was excited. It was what I wanted from Recettear. Potionomics starts with you getting summoned to your uncle's shop after his passing to get your inheritance. But all you get is a dilapidated shop and become soul-bound to his debt. It would be quite difficult to pay the 1 million gold in one lump sum, so the soul-binding lawyer allows you to pay back the debt in weekly payments. Luckily, there's a potion competition happening that gives out weekly prizes of the exact amount the lawyer needs. If you fail, you end up living out on the streets in a cardboard box. I first tried out the demo and loved it. The brewing was interesting and fun, building a deck for haggling was interesting, and the dating sim segments were nice. I bought the game as soon as it came out and blasted through the game. The one problem that I had was that within the first few days of the final week, I had potions that could easily win the match. I already maxed out the relationships with the NPCs I was interested in, so I kind of stopped playing and just did nothing until the final day and won. I could have kept playing and might have even earned enough to make the final payment without the competition, but making more money was no longer appealing. I had all the upgrades I wanted, so my money was pointless. But this didn't stop me from playing the game again and seeing how soon I could have all the potions I needed. After finishing Potionomics, I was left wondering if Recettear would be as much fun as Potionomics. But instead of playing Reciteer, I played Atelier Verona, the Alchemist of Ireland. It was a game that one of my friends had gifted me and I never played it. Atelier was a long-running series I had never heard of before. In Atelier, you play an alchemist that goes around and collecting items to use in alchemy to create items that are needed to complete a task in a time limit. The time constraint is removed later in the series. I had a lot of fun with Verona, collecting items, fighting monsters, trying to get the most out of my alchemy time, and making sure I got all the stars on each assignment. I was really bad at getting any of the requests from the other characters done on time. I would miscalculate the time it would take to collect the materials and craft the items, and completely forget about the requests or miss the required traits and qualities needed for the request. Also, the rewards that were given for the items didn't seem worth it to me, so I started to ignore them. In the end, because of this, I had max stars in all the assignments and low popularity, so I ended up with the normal ending. I had a good time with the game and was curious about the other endings and saw that I needed more popularity. That caused me to ditch the idea of starting up New Game Plus, especially since I had a little money. I then played through Atelier Riza, Ever Darkness, and The Secret Hideout. It almost scratched the same itch that Verona did for me, but without the time limit, there was no need for optimization, which is one of the parts I really enjoyed. I still had a great time with the game though, and after completing Rise's story, my mind once again went to Reciteer, and I knew it was time to give it a second chance. Tyr woke me up. It was time for us to open the item shop for the first time. I may have just woken up, but I was brimming with excitement. We, however, didn't have any items in stock. I brought my concern to Tyr and she reminded me that the guild operates as a wholesaler, so we should get items from there. I tried to leave the shop through the window, but Tyr told me to go through the door. The guild master welcomed us and I corrected by telling him that Tyr wasn't my loan shark, he's my partner. He will seize my house if I fail to make a single payment. The guild master answered all of my many questions that I had about various mechanics of the game. I went through the guild's inventory and spent almost all the 1,000 picks that Tyr gave me. We were right back home and Tyr began to explain how the item shop worked. Putting items near the window can attract customers. Only items being displayed can be sold at my current merchant level. Put all my items out, and before I could flip the sign that we were open, Tyr started up a tutorial on how to haggle. The item the customer wanted would be displayed in the target window. A base price listed below was an anchor point for pricing. She mentioned something about button 3 and custom.exe, but I ignored that. She then explained that I should try to find the exact price that the customer wants to pay, and that I will only have a few chances to find the right price. She also gave me advice that most people will accept 30% above the base price. After a bit of practice, Tyr told me that I was ready. Tyr reminded me of the saying that salesmanship is more of an art than a science. The first customer was a woman wanting to buy a loaf of walnut bread. I followed Tyr's advice and set the price at 130%. She rejected the offer, so I lowered it a bit and she bought it. Not only did I get paid, I also got XP as well. Completing a successful haggle would give me a base 10 XP, and there were hidden XP bonuses I could get for meeting certain conditions with the haggle. At certain XP thresholds, I would gain merchant levels, which would give me access to more options for the store. With that, the day ended with me becoming a successful item shop owner. Maybe asking yourself, why do we start running an item shop? To explain that, I first need to tell you how I met Tyr. It had been 3 months since my father ran out of the house saying, "I'm gonna be a hero!" I heard a knock at the door, I opened it and didn't see anyone. A small voice called out from below. It was a fairy. She asked if I was Reset Lemongrass. When I began to ask who she was, she firmly told me she was the one asking questions. After confirming my identity, Tyr told me she was from the Term Finance Company and came to collect the payment on the loan that was paid out to my father. She handed me his signed contract and her identification. As I stammered about what to do, she told me that if I couldn't pay, she would seize the house as collateral. I tried to explain that Papa wasn't here. She nodded, saying that they lost track of him somewhere near a volcano and hoped that he had returned home. Luckily, the contract stipulated that his debt fell to me if he went missing. I could barely provide for myself, let alone pay off this loan. Tyr reassured me that it wasn't all due at once. I started rambling about having my organs sold off and becoming a sailor. Tyr quieted me down. If I was willing to work, she would help me. I agreed and she presented her idea. This town is an adventuring hub, and what do adventurers need? Items! The house had great locations, so it would make for a perfect item shop. The next day, Tyr found me just as I finished making the sign for the shop. Tyr looked down at the sign and gave me a worried expression. I told her since we were partners, I put our names together to make the name for our shop. She didn't say no, so it became the name of the shop. What she didn't tell me was she was afraid of someone mispronouncing it as Racketeer. Tyr rudely ended my nice dream to wake me up and reminded me of my new responsibilities. After washing up, I came downstairs and asked Tyr what I should do next. She told me that I needed to decide that on my own, that there isn't one right answer. I needed to learn how to roll with the punches if I was going to run the shop, I sighed in acknowledgement. I said that I needed more money so I could get more stock from the guild. The first customer was a small girl. She wanted to buy some clothes. I followed Tier's advice, started at 130%. She began to cry and asked me to lower the price. I lowered it, she smiled and handed over the money. I think those were crocodile tears. A little bit more pics in my purse, I left the shop and saw the Adventurers Guild was open. After arriving, Tier explained to me that the Adventurers Guild controls access to all the dungeons. There goes my idea to get items from the dungeon and sell them at 100% profit. We could still go to the dungeons, we just needed to hire an adventurer to take us with them. But it wasn't as simple as paying any adventurer to take us. They had to be willing to risk their lives for us. Having successful interaction with the adventurers inside the shop would make them more willing to take us into the dungeons. I heard a young man across the room yelling at one of the clerks. He needed to join the guild to make money. But first he needed items so he could pass the test to join the guild so he could make money. But he also needed to be in the guild to make money to buy the items so he could pass the test to join the guild so he could make money. After hearing the young man, Tier had an idea. Tier introduced us. The adventurer told us he was far too poor and seedy to buy anything from us. We offered to help the seedy adventurer by providing items he needed to pass the test. In exchange, he would give us his eternal friendship. The adventurer accepted, and we now had an eternal friendship of an adventurer named Louis. I believed enough in Louis that he didn't need any items, so we headed straight into the dungeon. After entering the dungeon, Tier explained to me how we are protected from all the dangers in the dungeon due to the guild spell. But because of it, we couldn't interact with anything inside the dungeon. If Louis fainted, we would need to carry him back ourselves and only be able to bring back one item. The only way to keep all the items Louis collected for us was to make it to an exit in the dungeon. I needed to invest in a bigger bag. I could only carry 20 items. We followed Louis around as he defeated slimes and gnolls. I told him which items he should keep and throw away. After making it to the 5th floor, we found a big chest. Louis opened the chest in celebration for passing the Hall of Trials. Inside was a set of guild cards, and Louis handed me one. It was a symbol of our eternal friendship and allowed me to call him to a dungeon. A giant red door appeared behind us. Tier explained that was one of the exits to the dungeon that let us go home. The door of return would appear every 5 floors in a dungeon. Once reaching a door, we could start off at the next floor if we returned to the dungeon. We returned with the loot from the dungeon, and I put out a few of the items we collected and opened the shop. Louis showed up at the shop and I tried Tier's 130% again. He was not having it. I remembered how he said how poor he was and decided he will probably never pay that much. With a few other sales, I made a tidy profit. The next morning, Tier asked for a remote and told me that paying it all back at once was beyond my means. So instead, we were going to do weekly payments. I asked her how much Papa owed. Tier laughed and said I would faint if I found out. She then explained that the weekly payments would increase in size as the store grew. The first payment was 10,000 pix. I checked my purse and I already had more than a third of that. I made all that from one trip into the dungeon. This was going to be a breeze. It wasn't. I opened up the shop and made a few sales, then headed out to the Merchants Guild and bought some equipment for Louis to use in the dungeon. Louis was excited to head out because I was actually paying him this time. Gateway's first few levels weren't that much more difficult than the Hall of Trials. When we first entered, there was an alert telling us SP consumption was reduced by half. This was an introduction to the random events that could happen when entering a floor in a dungeon. Chests could now be found which either held a valuable item or a trap. There were also traps that activated when we entered rooms. We breezed through the first 4 levels. As we entered the 5th level, the giant crown slime appeared. A chill went down my spine. I remembered this slime and felt like I killed Louis in my dream. Each slash at Louis' sword did almost no damage to it. Louis had a hard time hitting the slime without getting him himself during this process. Even when it shrank, it kept absorbing other slimes that fell down. I yelled for Louis to focus on the small slimes and wait for the crown slime to shrink even further. With the crown slime shrunk to the same size of a normal slime, Louis' damage had grown exponentially. It still hit him like a truck, so he ate one of the precious candies and apples to stay alive. The sugar rush empowered Louis to cleave through the slime, and the 5th floor was cleared. Seeing how unprepared we really were for the dungeon, we took the door of return to go home. We arrived home late, but with my hard day of work, I exceeded Tier's expectations. I struggled with the decision if I should sell the quality equipment I got for Louis to use, since I could still use it to get further in the dungeon. And if there were things as strong as the crown slime, I was going to need all the help I could get. I decided to keep the armor and open up the shop. While haggling with the little girl, I got a near pin bonus. I didn't know what that was, but I got more than double XP for it. The pin price is when you hit the exact price the customer wants, and the near pin is being within a certain percentage of the pin price. Louis showed up and wanted to buy a sword. A box showed that his attack would increase if he bought it. With all that experience from those sales, I gained a merchant level. Tier then taught me how to buy items from customers who might come in with things to sell me. She reminded me to haggle down, not up. Tyr gave advice that between 50% and 7% was a good price to start. During the purchase, my text would be yellow, so if I rushed through dialogue, I should see that. After the tutorial was finished, I put out all the equipment and hoped that Louis would come back to buy them. Louis did come back, but he bought a chocolate bar. Then an old man got mad at me for the same markup he accepted before. I guess there was some randomness to what each customer wanted. Halfway through day 4, Tyr decided to lecture me on time management and explain how the day was sliced up like a pie into different time periods. My stomach growled at the mention of pie. Certain things were only available during certain times of the day. Visiting places didn't take up any time, but returning to the shop consumed 1 slice. Going to a dungeon took up 2 slices. With the tutorial out of the way, I rearranged the shop and opened up. I then made an oopsie and bought a walnut bread from an old man at 120%. I didn't even notice because I got a Just Combo plus 8. You get a Just Combo if the customer accepts the first offer. I at first thought the bonus was linear since it went from plus 2 to plus 4, but it was exponential. Then the combo was immediately destroyed by following Tyr's advice by trying to sell to a woman 103%. I then opened the shop again at night and no one started a haggle. But it didn't matter, I already had enough picks to make the next payment. With my purse flush with cash, I headed over to the market to buy some food to give to Louis in case he needed it. The longsword I wanted to give to Louis was not available at the Merchant's Guild. With food in hand, we delved into the next set of floors of Jade's Way. Louis didn't have too much trouble. If he got hurt or ran out of SP, they'd quickly refill with all the level ups he was getting. But there was a lot of unknown ingredients and my bag couldn't carry them all, so I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out what to keep. I even threw away some of the bread I brought in because it didn't seem that Louis needed it. On the 10th floor, we found a giant rat with a crowbar. Louis' attacks once again did almost no damage. Mushrooms began popping up and Louis tried to kill them as they popped up. The rat ate one of the mushrooms and undid most of the damage that Louis had done. The rat then fell over and Louis did some actual damage to it. It took a bit of time, but I figured out if the rat eats the purple mushrooms, it falls over. And once the rat started to eat the purple mushrooms, it stopped attacking and just kept eating mushrooms. With that, the rat was defeated. With our bags full, we used the door to go home. I leveled up again after making a few more sales, and Tyr let me know that some customers could now make a request for an item from a specific category. They might come in asking for weapons or maybe some sweets. I could even sell them items that aren't even displayed. We did a little bit of roleplay to practice. Tyr then told me what I already figured out. Selling equipment to adventurers makes it a permanent upgrade for them, and the item would no longer take up one of our precious item slots in our bag. And it might be a good idea to sell to them at a loss to make sure they buy it. I refilled the shelves and made a few more sales, but I couldn't find the right price for the little girl to buy the hat she wanted. This was my first time having a customer walk away from a haggling, and it wouldn't be the last. Over the next few sales, I got my highest combo yet, a plus 16. On our way to the Merchant's Guild, I saw a young elf girl wander around looking for her sister. I told Tyr that I wished that we looked like sisters, because that would make me the big sister since I'm bigger. Tyr gave me the same look she always gives when I tell her my ideas and flew away. The longsword was still out of stock. I gave Louis some food and we headed to the 11th floor. The dungeon seemed to be going fine. Louis was low on life but was going to level up soon. He opened up a chest and got hit by an ice trap. He made him slide around. Ice traps were commonplace, nothing special. As he slid down, a monster shot a circle at him that knocked him to 1 HP. Due to the ice trap, he slid in the same direction as the circle and got hit as soon as he stood up, knocking him out. Well, at least he didn't have the longsword. Even after fading, he just kept going. For my one item, I picked a cloth cape that was worth 2,000 picks to bring home. With that failure, Tyr told me that I reminded her of my father. In the morning, Tyr reminded me that it was collections day and that I needed to have the payment ready by closing. Knowing that I had plenty of money for the payment that was due, I called Louis up to go back into the dungeon. He told me he was going to take ice traps more seriously. Louis was at half life when we reached the 14th floor. He was pretty close to leveling, so he tried to clear the floor, but was still short of a level. I wished him good luck on the boss on the next floor. Surprisingly, there was no monster, just a chest on the 15th floor. I celebrated us reaching the lowest floor. Tyr explained that this might not be the lowest floor. Dungeons change for each person and then even adjust to how strong you are. A lady thief interrupted Tyr's explanation so she could attempt to steal our valuables. She quite easily knocked out Louis, so we ran away. I was quite upset with another failed adventure and was going to get plenty of equipment for Louis to destroy her next time. Luckily enough, she didn't steal any of our picks, so I was able to make the first payment. With that, I passed where I failed on my first playthrough. A well-dressed young lady looked down onto the city. She came to investigate rumors of a new shop. She wanted to show the city what a truly elegant shop would look like. A fairy appeared next to her and reminded her that she didn't own the shop yet. When I arrived downstairs, Tyr was watching a box moving around the shop. As I approached the box, I heard a laugh and someone began to talk to themselves. I tried to interrupt them, but they kept talking to themselves. After a bit of coercing, the young lady left her infiltration box. She introduced herself as Alet, my new rival. She then saw Tyr and decided to introduce her own fairy, Prime. Prime sighed at Alet's failed infiltration attempt. With the introductions done, the two infiltrators left the store. Wanting revenge on the thief, I bought a bunch of apples and had Louis go through the dungeon as quickly as possible. I even created a safety save to reload in case it didn't work out. Louis leveled up right before the 15th floor, so we were in the best possible position. The fight was quite close and my apples only healed for 16 HP, which wasn't much more than the 11 damage that she did in one of her attacks. Louis and Charm both got down to one last hit each. Louis somehow pulled it out. I approached Charm and asked if she was alright. She joked about how she was mortally wounded. I saw she was actually wounded, so I gave her some medicine to help her. I made sure to tell her to find her shop so she could come visit us. I'm not sure why Tyr got bad at me for telling her about her shop. After opening the treasure, Jade's Way was complete. The next morning, I received a new flash that price of candy had increased. Tyr gave an explanation that it meant the base price of candy was now twice what it normally was, 600 instead of 300. Hearing this news, I began to rush out to buy all the candy so I could hoard it all for myself. But Tyr stopped me, saying that the price would stabilize after some time had passed. Since this would be a more common occurrence, it would be a good idea to have a wide variety of stock to take advantage of this fluctuation. As I was getting ready to place the items in the shop, I saw the value of the vase I got from the dungeon. 21,400 pix. With that, I could almost pay the full 30,000 payment due this week. I also put some candy out due to the newsflash. The stain was now in red. With the next few sales I leveled up, and strangely Tyr didn't tell me what had changed with this level up, like she did the past few times. So I talked to her and went into the merchant's level menu. New items would be available at the market and merchant's guild, and I saw item fusion was my next unlock. I had flashbacks to my time at Altair. I was excited to finally be able to make something from all the monster parts. I immediately went out and bought all the new items. They were worth way more, so I would be able to make more money easily. I put all the new items out and was ready to see the money come flooding in. Then Charm appeared. She teased Tyr for not treating her like a customer. I gave her a big smile and welcomed her to the shop. The next few days I fell into routine, selling all of my stock, then going into the dungeon to get more items. During those days I saw my first news flash of a price drop of an item. These items are marked in blue. I found an adventurer who was lost in the dungeon, ran to Ella and the group of adventurers she had hired. I made my first item with fusion, changed the wallpaper of the shop, and got the eternal friendship with Charm. Everything seemed to be going well except that the price range I worked out for certain customers just stopped working. I went from 3 failed total haggles to over 15 in these 5 days. One of the big ones that really frustrated me was the vase from the dungeon. No matter how reasonable the price felt to me, no one wanted to buy it. Despite all these failures, I was able to pay the 30,000 that was due that week. First thing I wanted to do in the new week was to take Charm to the dungeon, and it was much more enjoyable with her. She could actually run, her shadow clone technique was fun to use, and she seemed much more capable than Louis. We ran into the Lost Adventure again and tried to help her escape the dungeon. We easily managed to the bottom and had quite a few components that I hoped would make some fusion items. Things began to feel better as I was having less haggle failures. Charm had even informed me that a new dungeon had opened up, so we should be able to go there the next day. I even got my first plus 32 just bonus. Then Tyr told me something that I didn't want to hear. I could now take orders in advance. This gave me flashbacks of the other shop games and how terrible I was at those orders, and how useless they felt to me. That's why I couldn't just give them the item then if I already had the item. Tyr wisely told me that they might not have the money then. Oh, that makes sense. I went out and fused a few items with the items I got from the dungeon. My day was going pretty well until a rude child came into the shop. He only wanted to talk to Tyr and demanded I sell him 3 items: a slime liver, a charred lizard, and a bat wing. I had sold the slime liver over a week ago, just used the charred lizard in a fusion, and lost the bat wing when Louis fainted. I didn't have anything he wanted. The new dungeon had just opened and I didn't want to go back to Jade's Way. The next few days flew by and I continued in my routine. I began to figure out a nice low price for customers to guarantee a just bonus. Charm got blown up by a bomb in the Amber Garden, put down a new floor in the shop. We finally helped the adventurer escape the dungeon and she visited the shop. We tried to get another slime liver and a charred lizard for the rude child, but didn't get any drops. I failed all the advanced orders I took, but thanks to my better haggling skills and managing of the inventory, I had more than enough money to pay the 80,000 that was due. On my way to buy more stock, I ran into a purple-haired woman at the fountain. She matched the rumor of a merchant trying to sell overpriced items in the plaza. She tried to sell me some postcards for 500,000 pix each. I turned Yuria down and hoped to never see her again. My day only got worse when we reached the 5th floor of Amber Garden. The boss almost did a third of Charm's HP per hit. Charm went to the bar to drown her sorrows, and I just bashed my head against the wall. Wiping in a dungeon was just so punishing. If I wanted to clear the dungeon, I would need to give up loot and bring equipment for Charm. After another day of sales, Nagi gave me her eternal friendship so she wouldn't get lost in the dungeons anymore. When I took Nagi to the Amber Garden, the world just felt a little bit bigger. Nagi's attacks didn't hit as wide as Charms or Louie's, but it did keep her at a safer distance. She even had an attack that slowed time as she hit enough targets with it. Her nemesis was bees. It was hard to line up her thrust attack with their strange movements. Nagi's rapid attack completely annihilated the Eye Bat King that Charm couldn't get past. He left the dungeon with a bat wing and a charred lizard. I then checked what items I needed for fusion, and began to realize how expensive each of these items were. If I could only carry out 20 items, 5 insect traps for the maiden bracelet was 1/4 of my bag space. But some of the items sold for a lot, so maybe they really were worth the time investment. Even with a few successful dives into the dungeon with Nagi, I started to feel nervous for the first time about being able to make the payment. Most of the money I had was built up from the past few weeks, and each item wasn't worth much. Even the items I got from the dungeon sold only for a few thousand, so I needed to succeed every haggle up to the due date to have enough money. I was starting to feel all that time loss and lost items I had due to dungeon wipes. I needed to just open the shop and clear out as much of my inventory as possible. Not only did I have the rude child coming in multiple times per day asking for his items, also I had Yuria coming in with her overpriced items I didn't want to buy. Failing to buy Yuria's items would end my just bonus streak, which would cost me the XP I needed for levels to gain access to more expensive items to sell. As the end of the week came, I breathed a sigh of relief. I had enough money to pay off the 200,000 picks. The tidy cushion I had made over the previous week had gone down 40,000 picks. Not only that, I had sold off most of my stock. Things were not looking good for the final week. I had figured out a lot of the customers and their range, but several of the ranges I found were quite small, so I needed some big ticket items if I was going to make it. I opened up the main menu and saw the payment due, 500,000 picks. I saw that and thought how much that vase from the first dungeon was worth. I gotta get to the bottom of Amber Garden and maybe the treasure there could save me. I bought Nagi a weapon, brought some watermelon, and prayed that we'd make it to the final floor. She was doing so well, making it out of some tight spots with some level ups, killing the giant enemy crab and the double crown slimes. But she ran out of healing on the 20th floor and was just 1 kill away from a level up when 2 ropers just had her number. We had so many valuable drops, this was devastating. I chose to keep the Void Stone in hopes that the fusion item from it would be worth even more. This was the beginning of the end. Charm had purchased some good equipment for me, so I took her to the Amber Garden hoping to get revenge. But it became quite clear within the first 5 floors how wrong I was. So as soon as the door of return appeared, we left. The most valuable item we collected was a cherry. One morning, Tyr reminded me to check how much was owed. I was well aware of the amount, and that amount seemed unobtainable. Over the next few days, I tried my best to keep my shelves stocked, but the profit just wasn't enough to make 500,000 by the end of the week. I was doing much better than before and even got the plus 128 just bonus. The 36 was getting closer and closer, and more customers just wanted to sell me items. There was no way for me to sell them quickly and make my money back. I closed the shop the night before the last day with just a little over half what I needed for the final payment. I prayed that the game would be kind to me and stop trying to sell me things. Tyr greeted me in the morning, reminding me that was the last day. I did have 2 separate orders for food that would come in. That might help a little. I went out to get a few more items and stocked the shelves and waited. The first customer was Aulette, a good start. She always buys things around 150%. I then got 2 customers in a row trying to sell me a loaf of walnut bread and a ham sandwich. I sold the ham sandwich and a shortcake to the first order. The other order came in and put me almost back to where I started the day. Then Yuri offered me her wallpaper for 250,000 pigs. I countered with an offer of 1 pix. She stormed out. I was not halfway through the day, and I only earned 1/10 of what I needed. I changed the counters for good luck and hoped some miracle would happen. The barrel counters felt like a curse. Not only did most of my customers want to sell me items, but they were all the really expensive ones. I closed the day with only 333,993 picks. I didn't even come close. Without sufficient funds, Tyr seized the house and I was out on the street in my cardboard box. At least it was bigger than Aulette's box. Then something magical happened. I heard Tyr's voice telling me to wake up, that all that had been a dream. Today we were going to open the shop for the first time. But somehow I had all the items I had the final day of my dream. I even felt more experienced. Oh, this must be what they call learning through osmosis. If you ever game over in Rusted 2, you lose all of your money, but keep just about everything else. You start off at day 2 and have to progress through the story again. So if you make it to the final week and game over, and if you have plenty of items like I did, it makes it really easy to make it back. Instead of going through the whole thing with you again, I'll talk about my chain strategy and the ending itself. I realized that the dungeons may have earned a bit of money in the early game, but they were not worth it. I needed to do them if I was going for a full item catalog because of the monster drops and fusion items, but as I mentioned earlier, those fusion items get really expensive time-wise. Leveling up my merchant slot would get me more item slots, but even at level 40, it would max out at 35 slots. Buying bulk from the guild and the market was the way to go. I found the price that worked for most customers, starting getting the max 128 just bonus almost every time I opened the shop, which skyrocketed my merchant level. At level 15, I got vending machines that allow me to sell more items, but with a smaller profit margin due to no haggling. Then at level 18, I got access to more items, which raised the amount of money I could make per sale. I got just under 1.3 million on day 22, so I stopped playing and just passed time so I could see the ending. With the successful final payment, Tyr and I stood out on the balcony. I think Tyr, because of her, I was able to meet so many different people. My life went from being boring to running a shop, going on adventures, and seeing things I've never thought I could see. There was always something exciting to do every day. And most importantly, I got to meet my partner Tyr. Tyr blushed and we both looked at the stars, and that's how I paid off my debt. There's still a bit of rest of Tyr left. Endless mode doesn't require any more payments. New Game Plus is just like getting a game over. Survival has payments that keep increasing until you can't make a payment. According to Owlette, any proper player wouldn't just play the game once. It would fill out the entire item encyclopedia. I didn't do any of that and only got 35% item completion. Haggling is your bread and butter in Breast of Tyr, but the game commits one of the worst sins. It gives you bad advice. Starting at 130% like Tyr suggests may make you more money, but usually will end up breaking your just bonus streak. It's better to prioritize your experience over the profit from each individual sale. Her advice on selling is even worse. She'll have you overpaying for everything. There are two characters who will only accept prices over 50%. That's Yuria and Prime. Haggling is the most interesting part of the game. Haggling has a lot of moving parts that can snowball into frustration if certain things go wrong. I started off hating haggling with the little girl, but by the end she was the easiest to deal with. Each character has a pin price that fluctuates around a certain percentage, as successful or failed haggle will increase or decrease your reputation with each character. Raising your reputation with each character will increase their budget when they visit your store, and unlock special events outside the shop. Characters who enter the store will only present items they can afford, but once you unlock orders, you can try to sell them something they can't afford. Like with my playthrough, I had this problem with Elon. I had a low reputation with him, and since I only had expensive items displayed, he would always request items. I'd present him with something way out of his budget. That caused a failed haggle that dropped my reputation with him and broke my streak. This became a doom spiral of failed haggles. I started to hate seeing him walk into my store. Advance orders can be a big boon as well, since it changes a singular sale into two sales. But the sale does take the character's budget into account, so they may not be able to afford what you offer, and if you fail to fulfill your order, you will break your streak. Dungeons feel like a trap unless you're in endless mode. Fusion items can be worth a lot, but they require so many materials and may not get the drops you need in a single visit. Merchant level 21, the price for adventures is halved, but their cost is so negligible by that time, it seems pointless. Dungeons are good for a change of pace and gameplay and provide a challenge to optimize bringing the least amount of items in to bring the most items out. My experience with character events felt like a really mixed bag. There were some that I thought were interesting because they did some world building. The others just felt like I was watching the same event over and over. The rank for Rest of Tears feels very different from the other games I play. There are really old jokes like who's on first, reset comparing a dungeon run to a dinner party, just saying funny words like yayifications, yepperoni and such, reset thinking that someone might be out to steal her cuteness, the list of quests that Louis is considering despite him barely being able to join the guild, overwhelming Owlette's cardboard box, or just reset cheering on Louis running for the law. There's just so much fun in it that it makes sense how it became such a big meme with Capitalism Ho. After 14 years, I finally came back and beat this game, and I feel a large amount of relief. It ended up being a game that I really did enjoy. It does feel quite short in length compared to the other games that it inspired, especially if you skip going into the dungeons. Rest of Tears is a microcosm of what the internet and games were like back when it was made. The humor, the mechanics, and presentation all are there. If you ever want to return to that time or just curious what it's like, Rest of Tears is waiting for you. Every game deserves a second chance.